Hello friends, today we will discuss about the important topics for this year mains examination in complete history. When I tell complete history, it will include art and culture, then history of modern India. It will also include post-independence India, and it will also include world history. So all the complete history which is roughly of 100 marks each year, around 100 marks question are directly asked from this portion. It may increase a bit, it may decrease a bit. It may happen that they will ask 75 marks question from this complete history, or they may ask 120 marks as well. It depends on UPSC, but on an average around 100 marks questions are asked from this whole subject history. Now this is one of the most vast syllabus, having the coverage of whole Indian history, whole world history, and then post independence as well. So it's very difficult to cover all of them. That's why I have come up with a video in which I will show you what are the most important topics in individual subjects. Let's start with the art and culture part. When I say art and culture, it will include the ancient and medieval part. In main specifically, they have written about the architectural development, the lingual development, the cultural development, and the development in the literature. They have specified what they are going to ask. It's not like prelims examination where there is the syllabus is very vast, but here they have specified. Now, the first important topic which has been asked repeatedly, and this year also it is very important, is Mauryan and Gupta architectural development. Now, why these two are very important? Because lot of the things have happened during Mauryan and Gupta period. When I talk about Mauryan period, there is a lot of development in terms of architecture. There is development of cave architecture, which is highly polished. You talk about Barabar caves, the fine example. Then there is also development of stupa. Lots of stupa were installed by Ashoka. Then there is a lot of rock edicts which were also deployed by Ashoka in different parts of the country, whether it is Maski to Kalsi to Kalinga, different parts, Topara, very different parts where they have been employed. So in Mauryan era, and there is also development in literature, specifically the Arthashastra, which is extremely important in terms of administrative history, etc. Then we talk about the Gupta architectural development. When I talk about Gupta, then there is a lot of development in terms of literature. In terms of literature, there are different Navratnas during the Chandragupta II, and they have developed a lot of things. Say for example, Kalidas. Kalidas has written so many books, Meghdootam, the Kumar Sambhavam, and so forth. There is development of the Ayurveda also, and a lot of development in terms of music. There is development of poetry. Samudragupta was himself a poet. He was also known as Kaviraja, and Prasastis were also written. So there is a lot of development in terms of culture. That's why they are very important, and architectural development as well. A lot of Buddhist caves, etc., will be developed during the Gupta period. And it is after the Gupta that there is vast development of temples. Temple development took a rise after the coming of Guptas. Then there is a topic which is extremely important, is different schools of sculptures, Mathura, Gandhara, and Amravati. So in Mathura, what is the characteristic? What is the characteristic in the Gandhara? What is the characteristic in Amravati? These have been asked, and this is still very important. uniqueness of Indus Valley civilization, in uniqueness in terms of their town planning, uniqueness in terms of their sculpture making, uniqueness in terms of their social organization. They have been compared to the contemporary civilization like Mesopotamia, how they were faring. So this is the topics. Then comes the Imperial Chola. When I talk about Imperial Chola, then Chola Empire made a significant development in terms of art and architecture in the southern part of the country. They have built up lofty temples like Brihadeshwara. They have developed a, a good naval base and naval technology. They were far superior than the contemporary other kingdoms at that point of time. So that you need to remember. So their contribution is huge. And then there is huge contribution of Cholas in the Dravidian temple architecture. Then we will talk about Bhakti and Sufi movement, which is extremely important in terms of UPSC examination. They have asked about nature and scope of Bhakti movement in the past. They have asked about a specific Bhakti saint Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They may ask about Ramanujacharya this year. Then Sufi movement, its tenet, its comparison with Bhakti movement, success, failure, etc. You can have a short notes. Then Buddhist and Jainism architecture. Buddhism, when I talk about, then the stupa architecture, cave architecture, these are extremely important that one needs to remember. And the Buddhist architectural development in the rural kingdoms, not rural, regional kingdoms, like Pala and Sena, how it blossomed there, how the Bengal school of Buddhist architecture was quite different, having Bangla dome, etc. Terracotta was used. It was quite different from the mainstream architectural development that one needs to discuss. Then comes the medieval Indian philosophy and impact on culture. When I talk about medieval India, there are a lot of philosophies. One is the Islamic philosophy, Sufism. What is the impact of these philosophies on the culture per se? Music, we talk about khayal and ghazals, and a lot of musical development took place after the coming of the Islamic rulers. Then there is also a lot of impact on the architectural development. Initially, the architecture was more of a religious in nature. There were palaces, no doubt, but then it moved towards mausoleum and more palaces, and the style of architectural development was quite different from the earlier time, that you need to understand, and how it was shaped by the philosophies of that time. Then Sangam literature and its depiction of society. When I talk about Sangam literature, there will be different books like Mani Mekalai, and different books are there which you need to quote as an example. If you are talking about, like, there was mention of caste system as well in the Sangam literature. There was a classification of lands in the Sangam literature. There was mention of local level election in the Sangam literature. There was mention about the women in the Sangam literature. All these points you need to mention. Then modern history. I have strong gut feeling that this year maybe modern history coverage or number of questions asked from modern history will be less, but let's see. UPSC can do anything. The first and most important is British economic policy. When I say economic policy, it ranges from the land revenue system to the drain of wealth theory. It encompasses all the things. It encompasses the education system. The education system was also part of the economic system, because through education system they wanted to develop a class of Indian who were Indian, but with taste they were Western. So they will consume more and more English goods, and they will have an inferiority complex as well. So it was part of economic policy. And its impact can be drain of wealth, its impact can be famines, its impact could be the degradation of education system, its impact could be the the feeling of two India, the Aryan invasion theory, that was also propagated by the Britishers. They were so racist that they were trying to find a parallel that before also there were some whites who came from outside who ruled you. You black people cannot rule yourself. So this was also one impact which was supported by many of the subaltern scholars like Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, but there is no conclusive evidence as such of this theory given by Wheeler and other English scholars. Then comes the revolutionary movement. When I talk about revolutionary movement, it not starts from 1920s. It starts from the 1897 Mitra Mela of Savarkar, V.D. Savarkar, Veer Savarkar, and then the effects of Tilak, Alipur conspiracy, or Aurobindo Ghosh during Swadeshi movement, the Akhada networks and the development of Anushrilan Samiti, Swadesh Bandhap Samiti, and different Samitis, Yugantar, all these, and then the throwing of bomb on Harding. Then during the World War One, the Zimmermann plan in 1915, and the efforts of Ras Bihari Bose and Sachindranath Sanyal, and then after 1920s, HRA, HSRS, Saeed Bhagat Singh, Rajguru, Sukhdev, Master Da 1930s, and then during the Second World War again, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, Indian naval mutiny, and in all these there is the contribution of women which you have to focus. When I talk about the development or the contribution of women, there are numerous examples, whether it is Basanti Devi, who ignited the revolutionaries in Punjab and Bengal, Durga Bhabhi, who had a large contribution in the revolutionary movements in the 1920s, especially the great escape of Shahid Azam Bhagat Singh, Kanaklata Barua, and Kalpana Dutt, who was a revolutionary in Surya Sen's army. Then Kanaklata Barua during the Quit India movement, and there are so many revolutionaries that I can name. Okay, so what was their contribution? Socio-religious movements. Socio-religious movements, what was the impact? First of all, how it originated. There was development of Western education, no doubt, and the Western education opened a new line of thinking which was based on the individual rights, liberty, equality, and now those ideals was compared with the prevailing society of that time, and then it proved to ignite a social reform movements stream, starting from Raja Ram Mohan Rai to Henry Vivian Thoreau to Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar to M.G. Ranade to Atmaram Pandurang to the Jyotiba Phule and Ramakrishna Mission, and so forth. There are so many, the Ahmadiyya movement to Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, and there are a lot of movements. You need to quote examples and names, otherwise you will get very average marks in history. That's a fact. What was the impact and what was the failure? There were so many failures as well. So many of the movements were revivalist in nature. Wahhabism, Swami Dayanand Saraswati, go back to Vedas, and it ignited communalism as well. Then Quit India movement, I am expecting a question this year from Quit India movement. They have asked for non-cooperation, civil disobedience, but Quit India movement, because it is seen through a lens that it was a violent movement or it was a non-violent movement, and the contribution of the young leaders, the development of young leaders. So a probable question can come from Quit India movement. Then Government of India Act 1935 and 1919. 1935 is extremely important because it shaped the police system, judicial system, the structure of Indian parliament, constitution at large. So Government of India Act 1935, and 1919 because of the large scale changes like providing the voting rights, etc., and the bicameral system and the provincial subjects, differentiating the provincial subjects, etc. Because of that, 1919 is also important. Then transfer of power and complications, because transfer of power was not done in a simple way. It was through a lot of ifs and buts. It started from the Cripps mission and August offer, then Cripps mission, then the Simla Convention, the cabinet mission, and so forth. So many things are there, and each and everything complicated the process. And then the Dickey Butt plan, and then Mountbatten plan, though, and then the confusion about the date. Okay. And all of a sudden, a red cliff came and then made a boundary on map, not on ground, no survey, nothing. So that complication of power, and they left out the princely state, and then the bloodshed, everything, the complications of 1940s, which is a very happening decade in India's modern history, very deciding decade. It led to development of two countries, Bangladesh and Pakistan. So it was a very deciding, and the scar of the partition and subsequent shaping of the Indian constitution and Indian policies were done in the 1940s itself. So it's a very important period. Then moderates versus extremists. The moderates, when I talk about then their contribution, their thinking, their line of action, and their conflict. So they see movement is important in this. There is some more thing which you can see is peasant and tribal movements. Don't read all the movements, just read some points like tribal movements, the general characteristic. So they were mostly sporadic in nature, and they do not had a future vision or plan. They were just trying to restore. Okay, and it was not only against Britisher, but it was against all the outsiders, the coups, money lenders, and all. And then the seclusion of the tribals and subsequent outrage. The left-wing extremism is the product of the British administrative policy of scheduled acts in the 1874, partially excluded areas in Government of India Act 1919, which made them administratively they secluded them, and economically they exploited them. So this you need to remember. Post-independence, not very important. One can easily answer all the questions. We have that type of knowledge. Reorganization of state, like state development, Fazl Ali Commission, JVP Commission, then 1966 reorganization. So some points. Then impact of Green Revolution in Indian farmers and society. So Green Revolution changed the entire caste dynamics, social dynamics of the society, and the policy making and the type of politics that is done in India. The Green Revolution led to rise of dominant caste, OBC, and other castes like in northern India, Jats, and in the western part, Marathas, Reddis in the southern part. So, and then the mandalization of political demand for reservation, capture of power, development of new political elite, everything happened because of Green Revolution. Land reform when I tell, then the tenancy rights, the land ceiling, which was done. So all these things you need to analyze. What was the success, what was the failure of all these things. Abolition of intermediaries. And land reform is not something which was done only in the 1950s. It is still an ongoing process. Digitalization of land records and conclusive ownership of land rights are also part of land reforms. Then comes the integration of princely states. When I talk about integration of princely states, then the complications, the role played by the Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, not very much important, but thoda sa scarce idea. India during Cold War era, when India entered the Cold War era, India told that we are non-aligned, but India had to align with Russia due to the contemporary development, due to the development of nexus between the US, China, and Pakistan, the role played by Nixon, and then India had to align with Russia. India was not really non-aligned. The 1971 war and afterwards the Pokhran test, all these things you need to have a brief idea, and I know you all have that idea. World history, World War I and World War II, how it developed World War I and how World War II developed, and then the impact of World War I and impact of World War II. World War II impact everybody knows. Okay. French Revolution and its impact. It was a never before event, so what was the impact? American Revolution and its impact, process of decolonization, specifically in the Africa. What were the factors? What was the role played by middle class intelligentsia? Like in India, Western educated class played a role. In Africa also, the same thing happened. Industrial revolution, it was also a never before event, and that industrial revolution led to the train of economic wealth from India and the colonization process. It was fueled by industrial revolution. So why in England? What was its impact? Then Japanese rise, the Meiji Restoration, and then the subsequent industrialization, the rise of Japan. Then Japan had beaten the Soviet in Russia in the 1904. The rise of Japan, and then the connection of Indian revolutionary with Japan, the inspiration taken by the Indian revolutionary, and the deep impact of the Japanese rise on Asia as such, the freedom struggle. Because there was a racial notion that Asians are inferior and they cannot beat us. This myth was broken by Japanese. Then Russian Revolution, specifically because of the Leninism and socialism policies that developed, that you need to have a bit of idea. So this is the complete uh, video on what is important for this year mains. If you will cover all this, I'm sure you will be able to solve maximum questions. And do revise, be confident, everything will be good. Take care, best wishes.